So it was a month, a month, a month. And within 4 months, we had made $1 million. So about 37.
Wow. My name is Ed JC Smith. I got a second chance at life, and I'm here to help you live life on your terms.
Record the video and the audio.
We are going, Natalie Hodson, 29 days to make 100K, start from scratch. In today's session, we have someone super special, the queen of vulnerability, but also a super successful entrepreneur. I've been following her journey. I'm so excited to have her on board because she is the real deal. She's made over $1 million in ebook sales from her gift, from her passion. And I think today, more than ever, she is outstanding for anyone to aspire to, but especially to have an empowered female to, you know, to watch what she's doing. She's got podcasts, she's doing great stuff. She's got online stuff. She'll tell you where we're going, but without further ado, let's get her on. She's got 29 days to make 100K. Natalie, thank you so much for being here. Go for it.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here. So a little bit about my background. I always say I accidentally fell into the fitness space, and I started in the fitness world, kind of selling ebooks on the side, and that was going well. And then after my divorce, my back was up against the wall financially. This was about 4 years ago, and I had to figure out how to make money to raise my kids, to provide for my children. And that's when I discovered the power of sales funnels and the power of vulnerability. And I know a lot of people hear the word vulnerability and they think, oh, that just means crying. And it doesn't. What it means, another way to say it is just be real. Just be very real with your audience, and be willing and brave enough to share stories that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Because what will happen is vulnerability is the ultimate human connector. It's like a magnet. That when you're willing to talk about experiences and things that most people truthfully are thinking in their head anyways, but they're too afraid to talk about, what happens is you start to share your stories, and all of a sudden people are like, oh my gosh, he or she is saying the exact same things I'm thinking, but I'm too afraid to say that. And so then they start to trust you, and once people trust you, they'll buy from you. And so I started learning this with my business, and then what really took off was a program that I created called Abs Core Pelvic Core. So it helps women, oftentimes after women have babies, if they laugh, cough, sneeze, jump on a trampoline, they'll accidentally pee their pants a little bit. Well, this used to happen to me. I actually had a video. I was filming a workout for a company I owned, and it happened. I was wearing gray shorts, and it happened on camera. And like you can see in the recording, this little dot on my shorts, and by the end, it's like I'm covered. And I was trying to like contort my body at the end, like, bye, you know. And I partnered with a doctor once I realized that this issue could be fixed. And there was a moment where I really had to have a heart-to-heart with myself and say, am I really willing to tell the whole world that I used to dance? And I used that video. I wrote a program that fixes this issue in 4 weeks, wrote an ebook about it, and we launched it. And in 4 months, I made over $1 million selling that $37 ebook.
Wow,
and today
that's amazing.
of ebooks. And so,
But
I think the biggest reason I've had success, I've launched lots of programs since, and some have done well and some have not done well. And I think that the core is when you're willing to be very real with your audience. Is usually, it's like pouring gasoline on, it's like if anybody likes to play the video game Mario Kart, right? I always say vulnerability is like a super mushroom. Like you start to use vulnerability in your content and you can like fly past your competition. So yeah, that's kind of the core of how I've built an audience of, on Facebook, we have about 500,000 people, on Instagram, about 50,000. Pinterest, we get 1 to 2 million unique views a month. And the core of it is just being very real and honest and vulnerable.
wow, that's so inspiring to hear, and I think that's just incredible. So you got 29 days, young lady. What you're doing? What you're thinking? What's your strategy?
So if I had to start all over and I had 29 days to bring revenue and cash into the business, my kind of area of genius are ebooks. I love ebooks because they have really high margins. Your cost to produce an ebook is quite low. And then after you create the content, it's just your Stripe fees, you know, so your margins are around 90 to 95%, which then what it does is it gives you more wiggle room to run paid traffic if you want to. So say I sell my ebooks for around $37. So I'm willing to spend, and then we have upsells and things in our funnel. And so our average customer spends about $50 through the funnel. So I'm willing to spend $25 on a Facebook ad to acquire that customer. So a lot of people will come to me and they'll say, well, Natalie, it's not fair because I don't have a big audience like you do. And, remember, I spent years building that audience. But even if I didn't, you can certainly run paid traffic to your digital products. And because the margins are so high and you make that money back that very same day, that's typically how when we do a launch, that's how we do it. And then what I would do is so here's one of my little tricks that I have. So once I started realizing that being honest and real and vulnerable with your audience works, I started to really study the science of this, because I think maybe naturally I tend to be a little bit more vulnerable. Maybe it was the way I was raised. Maybe it's just innate inside of me. But part of my story, and I'll just share this real quickly, is that I'm the oldest of 10 kids. And when I was growing up, my mom was in and out of prison most of my life. And so I spent a lot of time in women's penitentiaries. And I think that's actually where the heart of why I'm good at being vulnerable, where it began, because I would listen to these women's stories and I'd recognize that everybody struggles, and I don't believe that anybody's entirely good or anybody's entirely bad. And I think that once we recognize that we're all a lot more similar than we think, because most of us have this armor that we wear of, I'm perfect, I have it all together, I've got everything going right. And once you kind of strip that away, two things happen. You start to have stronger connections with other people, because you start to realize, hey, we're all a lot more alike than we think. And two, it actually makes you feel a lot less alone when you realize that maybe other people you really look up to are really struggling as well. So one thing that's kind of interesting, and I have this list here I'm going to pull up. When I started to look at the data, I started to realize that for women, the number one, so here's the interesting thing about shame and vulnerability. They're like oil and water. Shame and vulnerability cannot survive together. And so the more vulnerable you're willing to be with your content, with your storytelling, with your content creation, the amount of shame somebody has around that topic drops, right? They're like oil and water. They can't survive together. And so what I started to do, and what is shame, right? Shame is the belief that we're not good enough, that we're not capable of change. So I really started to dig into the science of what are the most shame-inducing topics that just as society that we feel, because I started to realize if I can be more vulnerable on those topics, the amount of shame will go down. And when people don't feel shame, then they do believe that they are capable of change. They do believe they are good enough, and they're more willing to buy your products, right? When they believe they are capable of change, that something will actually work. And so I started to look at a lot of the science around it. And for women, the number one shame trigger is body image. For men, the number one shame trigger is not being able to provide, right? Not being able to provide for your family.
Wow.
And so, but then if you go down the list, the other topics are appearance, aging, religion, parenting, family problems, stereotypes and labels, sex, especially for women speaking out or being too loud, addiction, surviving trauma and abuse, and mental and physical health. And so once I knew statistically studies have proven that these are the top shame-inducing topics, I started to write a list. So one of my business mentors is Russell Brunson, and he always talks about when you're selling, you can sell people by creating epiphany bridges through storytelling. So you want to have an arsenal of stories in your head that you can always do to help give somebody an aha moment. So I took that a step further and I said, well, I should have an arsenal of stories around each one of these topics. So I actually wrote out a list of stories that I could tell, or stories that I've heard from other people on each of these topics. And then what I did is I said, okay, how can I create products that solve a solution or a problem that I've had in the past around any of these topics, right? Body image. I have weight loss programs. Peeing your pants, that's embarrassing, right? That's appearance. I created a program around that. Pregnancy and mental health, postpartum depression after pregnancy, I created a program around that. And so what I started to do is I looked at my audience and I said, I looked at my Google Analytics, where do I get the most engagement from my audience, and how can I create a product that will help serve them? What I know works really well, which is being honest and real and vulnerable with your audience. And so it's like it's like a 1-2 punch. So you start telling your stories and people are drawn to you because all of a sudden you're saying things that people aren't usually talking about. And then 2, you create a product. I like to do ebooks because they're quick to create. You can write it in a Google Doc and then just turn it into a PDF with some images. And then you put a solution out there and they feel connected with you because they feel like you understand them and where they're coming from. And so that's kind of been my business model. We've tried a lot of other things, and ebooks still are the #1 profit generating source in our business. And so that's where I would start. Is I would start with an arsenal of stories. I would take that list of those topics that I just said. Now, here's the thing, is that when you do this, it's going to feel very uncomfortable, right? You're going to start thinking, okay, I teach my audience about how to create wealth and generate income. I don't want to tell a story when I was in bankruptcy, or when I didn't know how I was going to pay my credit card bills, or when I maxed out my credit cards. Like, I don't want, people aren't going to see me as the guru and the leader if they know that I've struggled just like they are. But the truth is, and here's the thing, is that when you're the one being vulnerable, it feels scary and small and, well, scary is the biggest word, but to everybody else, it looks brave and courageous. And you have to remember that. And then the second thing I would caution and advise is just be cautious to share scars and not open wounds. So here's the thing, right, is that we all have that one friend on Facebook who puts all their drama out there and you're like, oh, like popcorn, this is fun to watch. But from a sales perspective, it usually doesn't work that well, unless it's something that you're not really super sensitive about. Like, I've shared things like I yelled at my kids and I've shared that, but because I know I'm a good mom, I'm not really insecure about that. I was okay sharing in the moment. And so one of my tricks is that what I do in the moment when I'm feeling that very heavy feeling, I write down, and this is very important, you write down how you're feeling in the moment. Because usually when you've worked through something and you're trying to tell the story later, you kind of forget that raw emotion. Storytelling. And I've sat in front of my computer lots of times and had writer's block, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to tell this. But if I have a shorthand version in my notes in my iPhone of how I was feeling in the moment, it's a lot easier to write those stories later on. And so then, the problem with sharing in the moment is that sometimes it can actually feel uncomfortable to other people. If you're like, I'm going to file for bankruptcy tomorrow, right? It's like, it's a little uncomfortable. And then 2, the other thing is that any little bit of criticism that you get can shatter you into 1,000 pieces. And so oftentimes what I'll do is I'll wait till I've worked through it. And then I tell the story. I show myself some grace. Maybe I tell a time where I felt a similar feeling in my life. And then I come back with how I worked through it, or if I'm in it, how I plan to work through it. So it's this amazing system that works really well, because you come in with the storytelling, the dramatic part, and you draw people in because they're like, oh my gosh, she understands how I'm feeling. And then because the 4th step is the most important part, where you come in at the end and you talk about how you work through it or how you plan to work through it. Because then all of a sudden what it does, it's just somebody else listening. It gives them hope. It gives them that 4-minute mile, right? Where it's like, wow, if she could do it, I could do it too. And so, if you're just starting from scratch and you're hearing this and you're like, okay, the system sounds great in theory, but how do I actually make it work? What I would do is I would get a piece of paper and I would start writing out an arsenal of stories that you can do to bring in your audience. And then once you have your stories, then you can kind of plot them, right? And you can say, I could use this story here in my email sequence to sell somebody to a challenge, to sell somebody to a webinar, to sell somebody to an ebook. I could put this story here. I could put this story here. I could put this story here. And what it does is you're constantly strengthening that relationship with your audience. And then at the end, you're hitting them with your sale of whatever it is that you're going to sell. But starting with the list of stories will kind of give you a roadmap of, okay, I have these assets, right? These stories. How can I use them to build trust with my audience to then sell something at the end? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think that's such it's very interesting methodology that you took. It's probably the most unique one today. A very systemized approach to, building know, like, and trust through your experience. So building that connection with your client, solving a problem, and doing it in a very simple way with a with a, you know, an ebook, which is brilliant. So I love it. Very, 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 very clear. Very good. That's
I
very,
like ebooks because it's an easy deliverable, right? You just
yeah.
send it to them through email, and then you have their email address that you can upsell them to things later on.
Mm,
And then one of the things that I like to do is to plug a continuity program into an upsell inside of your funnel, so then you're
mm,
getting regular revenue from them after the initial sale. And then sometimes we don't get a great take rate inside the funnel, but then you can upsell them through email sequences after. And usually once they've had good results with your ebook, then they're willing to buy the next program from you.
mm.
The one thing I do want to caution is that oftentimes when you're vulnerable, in fact, I would say almost 100% of the time, you're probably going to experience something that I call a vulnerability hangover. So you'll probably put something out there and then you might get this pit in your stomach of like, why did I just share that? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just told people. And so, or when you get your first hater, right? Or you get some criticism, you might start feeling this
You
vulnerability.
can't have a hater, Natalie.
Oh,
There's no way. How
I,
can
I get
you?
hate
I
messages.
can't even imagine you shouting at your kids. When I saw that on your Instagram, I was like, you were like the nicest person.
I don't get it either because I think I'm a nice person,
You are
but
the nicest person I think I've ever met.
so here's the thing that I've learned is that usually when people are critical, it's almost always much more about them and what they're struggling with
Totally
than
agree. Totally
you.
agree.
You probably said or did something that triggered that. Um,
What do they
what
say
I
to
do when
you?
I,
Just out of curiosity, what does
what was that?
what would a hate? What do they say to you?
Oh, people are every day.
Really?
Who do you think you are? This information should be free. If you really cared about people, you would give this for free.
Ah, okay.
I'm a huge avid outdoors person. And so whenever I post, so I hunt and I fish and we eat that meat throughout the year. If I post any of those pictures, I get death threats. Like I've had to report death threats to the police. Uh,
Nice. That's
yeah,
when you know you're getting good engagement.
yeah, that's true. I'm still a single mom. Death threats are a scary thing. Um,
Yeah.
I get people saying that, I'm not relatable because I have a successful business. And that's when, you just have to remember some people are coming from
Mm.
a space where they're in a hard moment. And so what I do when I'm feeling those vulnerability hangovers is I keep my circle very small. I lean
Yeah.
into a handful of people that I trust and can share my struggle with or the feelings that I'm
Mm.
having. And then usually what I do is I recognize that person, whoever was being critical, it's
Yeah.
more about them than me. And I try to pinpoint what part of what they said triggered something in me.
Mm.
And I thank them for the awareness and I move on. I don't
Mm.
respond. I don't even give them any of my energy. It's not worth it
Beautiful.
at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I deserve haters. I mean, I did an ad with a tank in crushing it, and people were just hating down on it. But I think it's a shame where, you know, they can't see the goodness. But again, it's what you choose to focus on, isn't it? But I love that. So what would be are there any mental blocks that you think that people could have going through that process? As I said, writing it down, which is so systemized, and I totally agree. It's an absolutely awesome methodology. Any blocks or why, you know, obviously you've dealt with hundreds and thousands of people today. So
So a couple things. So my approach is different because I like low ticket items. A lot of people might say, okay, 100K, sell 425K coaching programs. And that is an option. I like low ticket because you can help a lot of people and your deliverable is less, right? You write the
mm,
ebook and then you're done with that customer. And so I think some mental blocks might be, well, how am I really going to make a lot of money off of this? But you'd be surprised. Ebooks can be very profitable. They have been inside my business. And the other block might just be, I'm not qualified enough to do something like this.
mm,
So I have two suggestions for that. One, you're probably more qualified than you think, right? Like I'm not a private chef, but my crock pot cookbook ebook sells really, really well just because I like to cook, right? And I can relate to the pain points of a busy mom, so who doesn't have time to prepare healthy food, who maybe has picky eaters, who is on a tight budget. Because I can relate to those pain points, I can sell my crock pot cookbook really, really well. And then the other option is that if you don't think you're qualified, for example, abs, core, pelvic floor, I truly there were some things that we talked about that was out of my, I mean, I'm a certified personal trainer, but I don't, I wasn't specialized in pelvic floor dysfunction. So I partnered with the doctor to help write that ebook, and we co-wrote it together, and she gets a percentage of the royalties as long as we sell that ebook. But I was comfortable doing that because I knew we'd get questions that were outside of my scope of interest. And so that's another option, is that you can always partner with somebody who is a little more qualified than you do. It'll give the program some credibility and might even help you get everything up and going faster, because sometimes when you're trying to write something yourself, it's hard to like finish it. And so the advice I would give to that is don't give too much away at the beginning. That was a mistake that I learned. I had no clue abs core pelvic floor was going to take off the way that it did. And if I could go back in time, well, knowing what I know now, I would have just offered a flat fee. But when I wrote abs core pelvic floor, I didn't have cash to do that. So I offered a percentage, and I would have negotiated a lot harder because I had no clue that this program was going to go on to sell millions of dollars. But I don't have resentment towards it, because that doctor gave the program the credibility that I wouldn't have had on my own. And so I don't think the program would have had the success it did had I not partnered with her.
How many people have got it now, that book?
Oh gosh, I don't know, over 130,000 customers.
How amazing is that?
Yeah,
That is so cool.
Yeah, so we've helped a lot of women quit peeing their pants.
Yeah, I mean, that is.
Other things too. That's kind of our hook that grabs a lot of people in, but it also improves something called diastasis recti, which is oftentimes women, after they have babies, their ab muscles separate and then they don't come back together properly. So they still look kind of pregnant. And this program brings those muscles back together. So we've helped a lot of women. Yeah.
Wow. So if you hadn't have gone, so you said you had a divorce, and did you have this, like, what was your kind of key moment in life where you're like, you know, like what was that allowed you to take the leap of faith?
That's an interesting story. So I was a history major in college. If you would have asked me 10 years ago what I'd be doing, I never would have guessed that this was it. What happened, I started a blog 10 years ago, and it was like a personal journal. I had gained 70 pounds when I was pregnant. I had two 10-pound babies, so I was like way out here. And I just started a blog to keep me accountable to lose the weight. And I like to cook, so I started putting recipes on Pinterest. And I started getting a lot of traffic to my site from Pinterest, like 30,000 people a month. And I was like, well, if I have this audience, this traffic, I might as well try to monetize it. So that's when I started writing ebooks. And I was making okay money as a stay-at-home mom, just kind of doing this on the side. And then it was really after my divorce. So our divorce took a while. We couldn't agree on how to split assets. And so I stopped selling everything. I stopped selling all my ebooks because I was like, well, I don't know if I'm going to have to give 50% to my ex-husband. So when the divorce was final, I remember I had 3 months of rent left in my checking account. That was it. And I had no regular income coming in, and I seriously didn't know what I was going to do. And that's when I stumbled across sales funnels, which I definitely highly recommend using ClickFunnels. Everything that Russell Brunson is the owner of that company teaches works. And I started to really think about ebooks. I looked at my Google Analytics and I said, what's the number one reason why people are coming to my website? And it was this random blog post on this weird word called pelvic floor dysfunction, which is peeing pants. And number 2 was diastasis recti. And that's when I started thinking, oh my gosh, I have this video of me peeing my pants. I wonder if I could write an ebook. So I remember I reached out to the doctor my friend who's a doctor, the day after Thanksgiving. We started writing the book the day after Christmas. We launched it January 31st. So it was a month. And within 4 months, we had made $1 million. So about 37 bucks. So that's a little longer than 29 days, but I also never knew anybody that had been writing ebooks. I didn't know what I was doing. I never spent a dime on Facebook ads. So there was a little bit of a learning curve for me, but now I can write an ebook in a week and we can have that launched and ready to go. So, you know, and we've tried lots of things since. We've tried physical product, but we've tried, you know, events. Nothing is as profitable as us as the ebooks are.
Wow. That is just, it just blows my mind. I just want to say thank you so much for inspiring, and I'm so proud to know you and so proud to see your journey. I think it's just wonderful. You are such a beacon for female empowerment, taking something that, you know, is a problem, turning it into a profitable online business today is just wonderful. Where can people go and find you unless they need you in their
Yeah.
life, where do we send them to? Where's the best?
So my website is just my name, Natalie Hodson. It's H-O-D as in David, S-O-N as in Nancy.com. We are starting a new 21-day challenge, which is a really fun challenge where you get regular video access to me every single day for 21 days. And it's learning to keep promises to yourself. So saying you're going to do something and then actually do it. And that's challenge.nataliehodson.com if you're interested in that as well.
Oh, so go there, guys, because you need it. You need her in your life. Thank you so much. Give her a hand. All right, Natalie, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'm just going to stop record
I will start
there.
clapping when you clap.
Yes, stop clapping. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're a coach and consultant, you're tired of not getting clients at the click of your fingers, then go grab a copy of my book at www.coachingbusinesssecrets. It's a straight line approach so that you don't have to get overwhelmed, so you don't have to worry about whether it's going to work for you. All right, we're talking scripts, web scripts, ad scripts, you name it, it's all included. It's actually $100 plus, and I'm giving it away for a fraction of that, less than a cup of coffee, so you can get deep down into that, and so you can finally grow the business that you really want to grow without all the hassle. That being said, no matter what happens, never give up on your dreams.